Hello everyone, this is Dr. Larson here. I'm going to go ahead and get started. This is the Mastering Hormone Balance for Women webinar. This is actually based on a presentation I've done at least over 20 times to different groups of women over the past few years, and it's a presentation I really enjoy giving, and it's one where I consistently get really good feedback from the women who attend, telling me that they wish they would have learned this information a long time ago, and so let's go ahead and get started. I always start the presentation the same way by saying, welcome to hormone school, because this really is kind of like a hormone 101 for a lot of women in learning some things that they probably should have learned a long time ago. And like I said, I've done this presentation many times to many groups of women, and the other reason why I say welcome to hormone school is I really do want this to be kind of a classroom style presentation. Obviously through a webinar we're not in a classroom, but I want it to be a presentation where you feel very comfortable asking me questions. And you'll see off to the side on your computer screen there's a column there called a chat window, and you can go at the bottom of that, you can go ahead and type in any questions that you want to during the presentation. I've actually input into the presentation slides that say questions, where it'll make me stop and go through your questions and answer your questions, but you can type those questions in anytime you want to. And really do like it when you ask questions. I find the best presentations I give are when people are asking lots of questions. So I look forward to your questions, and I hope that you will feel comfortable asking questions. Just a little bit about me. Again, my name is Dr. John Larson. I've been a doctor for almost a little bit over 18 years now. And sometimes the question comes up is, how does a guy like me, I'm in my mid-40s, how do I even become an expert in female hormone testing and end up helping all kinds of women with female hormone problems of all different ages? And it really started when I first became a doctor. I opened up my own private practice, and even though my original professional degree is as a doctor of chiropractic, when I opened up my own private practice, I didn't actually promote chiropractic. I promoted my interest in helping people with weight loss, because that fit within my specialty and my interest when it comes to diet and nutrition. That's always been my specialty and interest my whole career. And really early on in working with people in weight loss, it became clear early on I had to get very good at testing at doing very good testing for thyroid function and finding natural ways to help balance thyroid function, which I still do a lot of that with people. But also very early on it became very clear that for some women, their primary reason why they were not able to lose weight was because of the imbalance of their female hormones. And so in part by necessity, because I wanted to help these women, but also in part just my own natural curiosity took over, and that sent me on a path of for many years learning lots of different things and from different experts and going to seminars and such, just to acquire the knowledge and the skill to be able to do very effective testing and offer very effective dietary and nutritional therapies to help women who had concerns that were related to the female hormone balance. So not just weight gain, but all the other concerns and symptoms that can go along with that. So my hormones are driving me crazy. So this is actually a picture of my older daughter, Grace. This is from several years ago. So I asked her to give me her impression. She was about 3 years old at the time. So I asked her to give me her impression of a woman whose hormones are driving herself crazy. And so this is what I got from her. And so naturally, like any good dad, I told her that if she kept doing that with her face, it would get stuck that way. So just so you know, her face to go back to normal, here's a couple pictures of her. And this is actually a few years old now, and I keep thinking maybe I should go and update these pictures. But if you're like me, it's kind of fun to look back at these old pictures as well. This picture is not related to anything. Just a picture I really like of her. We took my oldest daughter and probably our younger daughter as well down to a local park, and she went down this slide and her hair got a little bit staticky, so we told her to go down a couple more times, and her hair just got all crazy. So maybe this is how some women feel when their hormones are just out of control and they're getting a lot of symptoms and problems. So the question then is, why should we care about hormone balance? What does hormone balance affect? And there's so many possibilities for the way this can present itself, or the symptoms that can manifest from this. But it can range from hair falling out to having excessive hair growth on the face and on the body, so kind of two opposite issues. When women consult with me and they talk about hair falling out, my first thought really goes back to thyroid function, and we'll talk a little bit about thyroid function in this presentation. The majority of what we talk about will be related to estrogen and progesterone, but I'll talk a little bit about thyroid as well. But that's a thyroid problem, or a low functioning hypothyroid problem, is probably the number one thing that comes to mind when a woman is explaining that her hair is falling out, sometimes coming out in clumps when she's brushing her hair or when she's washing her hair. And if I do testing of the thyroid, and the testing I do of thyroid is always very, very thorough, very complete, and usually more complete than what a person gets when they go to their regular medical provider. And if that comes back and that looks normal, then the second most likely reason comes back to the imbalance of female hormones. Now, if that were to test normal, then I start thinking about protein deficiency, not getting enough protein in the diet, or maybe there's other kinds of deficiencies that are going on. And probably the least likely reason is an autoimmune condition that attacks the hair follicles, but that's a much more rare scenario. So hair falling out can be a somewhat common symptom of female hormone imbalance. And then we go to the opposite issue of excessive hair growth on the face and body. And this will typically happen in the type of hormone imbalance that we refer to as estrogen dominant. So what that means is the body is dominated by too much estrogen. So in our conversation today, we're going to talk a lot about estrogen and progesterone. We'll talk a little bit about testosterone and some thyroid hormone. But what you want to understand is, between estrogen and progesterone, it's not always the levels they test at. It's just as important the ratio between the two, because they tend to balance out each other. And it's more so that progesterone will help balance out the effects of estrogen, especially when estrogen levels start going too high. But in this term of estrogen dominance, again, what that means is the body is dominated by too much estrogen. And when this goes on for a longer period of time, this then can also result in testosterone levels increasing. And this is a most obvious kind of symptom for a woman who's been diagnosed with what's called polycystic ovarian syndrome, or abbreviated PCOS. It's a classic scenario where estrogen levels go too high, progesterone levels go too low, and then eventually testosterone levels start increasing. And testosterone, being a male-specific hormone, will result in extra hair growth. And for women, a lot of times that shows up on the face or on the cheeks and chin. Sometimes it'll be more hair growth on the arms, and even on the chest and stomach as well, or the back. And so that's an obvious kind of symptom of a hormone imbalance. And then we get into areas that tie into brain structure, brain function, or balance of brain chemistry. And so even when looking at the physical structure of the brain, what's interesting is they've done scans of women of their brain before and after going into menopause. And what they find is that as a woman goes through menopause, the actual physical structure of her brain will change because of those hormone changes. And so you can be pretty certain that if that hormone change is affecting the physical structure of the brain, it's a very logical and very accurate assumption that it's also having some kind of impact on the brain chemistry as well. And so that's why I have listed here in the middle, anxiety and depression can be common symptoms of female hormone imbalance, which then also can affect mood or emotional state, all tying back into the very direct impact that these hormones have on the balance of brain chemistry. We also get into bone density and how that relates to balance of female hormones. And so this usually becomes more of a concern as women get closer to menopause, or once women go into menopause and the hormone changes that happen. So essentially, just so you have a clear understanding of this, for all women, obviously it's a natural process for women when they get into their late 40s or early 50s to go into menopause. And what that means is that the ovaries, as the main hormone producing organ or gland in the body, essentially the ovaries shut down in their function. And so what happens is that estrogen levels will start to decrease. But it's actually not just estrogen, it's also progesterone and testosterone and even some other hormones that will start to decrease. But the problem that this presents with bone density is that one of the positive benefits of estrogen is it helps to slow the breakdown of bone tissue. So what that means is that if estrogen levels drop down too far, that will create opportunity for bone tissue, for bone density to decrease more rapidly. But it's not just that, because the other hormones, if they also go too low, such as progesterone, testosterone, DHEA, these hormones actually help you in building new bone tissue. So what ends up happening for a lot of women is when they go into menopause, the ovaries will shut down in their hormone production, and it's not just estrogen that will go down, it's also progesterone, testosterone. And so you get kind of a double whammy in that estrogen goes down, so bone tissue can break down more rapidly, but then progesterone, testosterone can also decrease, which makes it more difficult to build new bone tissue. And so this is why you'll hear of some women, more common, in the previous couple decades, but still happens, where they'll get diagnosed with some kind of or get prescribed some kind of hormone replacement medication, specifically to help maintain or maybe even build some bone tissue. Softness of your skin is also affected by what's going on between these hormones of estrogen and progesterone. And the connection here is that estrogen has a softening effect to the skin. And this is something that that manufacturers of lotions and skincare products are very, very aware of, because they actually have a way of sneaking in a little bit of estrogen-like compounds into these skincare type products to help give the skin a more softer look and feel. And I think the reason why they can do this, and actually you won't see it listed on the label as estrogen, but I think the reason that they can do this is, and not have it show up on the label, is because if it's below a certain level, it doesn't need to appear on the label, is how labeling works in the United States. The problem is, hormones, even though they're very tiny molecules or kind of chemical compounds, a small amount can have a very big effect. And so for some women, they may be looking for the benefits of what these personal care products have to offer for softening the skin and improving appearance of skin. But if they're also, even before doing that, if they're also struggling with the situation where the body is dominated by too much estrogen, they might actually be enhancing that estrogen dominance based on the personal care products that they're using and not even know it. Also, we look at how the body's physical structure will respond to these hormones, and what will happen is when the body is dominated by too much estrogen, it will actually hold the muscles in a little bit of a tighter position. So in general, what you want to understand about estrogen is it's a little bit more of a tissue stimulating, can be kind of an irritating kind of hormone when it's in excess within the body, and not just within the brain or balance of brain chemistry, but also on the body's physical structure. And the way that will show up is more muscle tightness throughout the body. Whereas progesterone has more of a calming effect on the body. And so progesterone has a calming effect both on the mind and the body as well. So even metabolism, there's lots of benefits when it comes to progesterone. But as I'm talking about these two hormones of estrogen and progesterone, I don't want to give you the impression that estrogen is always the bad guy and progesterone is always the good guy. It's just that more often the imbalance that women have is either there's too much estrogen in the body, there's not enough progesterone, or it's a combination of both. Health of the heart and the cardiovascular system is also directly impacted by the balance of female hormones. And the connection here is that one of the concerns when women go into menopause is that if estrogen levels drop down too low, that will actually increase a woman's chances of having some kind of a heart problem or cardiovascular problem as well. So there are definitely consequences, and it's not just the hot flashes and the inconvenience of the menopause symptoms, but there are also other physical consequences to estrogen levels going too low as well. Digestive function can be directly impacted by the balance of female hormones, and typically the way women will communicate this is more the tendency towards constipation, which is a classic symptom of a lower functioning thyroid or hypothyroid, but I've also seen it where thyroid is working fine and it was the female hormone imbalance that was kind of slowing down or affecting digestive function. Then we get into quality of sleep, and this is most obvious when women go into menopause, and if they're starting to get the hot flashes and night sweats. I have some women that tell me that they wake up a dozen or more times a night with their hot flashes, and so obviously it's very, very difficult to get a good night's sleep when those kinds of symptoms are dominating what's going on with your body. And so then obviously, we're looking to offer faster relief of symptoms so they can get better sleep. So it's not really a true insomnia. It's kind of feels like insomnia, but it's really an effect of or a symptom of the hormone imbalance that's going on. And then we get into the more obvious areas with reproduction for fertility or ability to get pregnant, ability to maintain that pregnancy, what's going on with a woman's monthly cycle, whether it's more of a normal cycle or if it's becoming abnormal or sometimes even extreme for some women in the length of their period and the amount of blood flow and the amount of cramping. And in fact, thinking about fertility, what's interesting, when I do this presentation in person with women, I usually will ask them to raise their hands if first of all, if they've ever been pregnant. And so most women, their hands will go up. And I like to explain that female hormone balance, or better said, in order to maintain pregnancy, it requires a certain kind of imbalance. And so obviously female hormone imbalance is necessary just for the survival of the human species, because there has to be enough balance there to get pregnant and be able to maintain the pregnancy. But the other question I'll ask is ask women to raise their hand if they actually felt better while they were pregnant compared to not being pregnant. There's always a few hands that will go up. And so the connection there is that in order for a woman to become pregnant and to maintain pregnancy in the first trimester, the first few months, progesterone levels have to be high enough. And so for those women who maybe they can get pregnant, but they are more frequently get miscarriages, or if they just have difficulty getting pregnant, a lot of times these are women who are too low in progesterone even before getting pregnant, and there's just not enough progesterone there to maintain that pregnancy. So either they don't get pregnant, or if they do, they're more likely to have a miscarriage. This is why it's very common when women go to fertility clinics, they might actually prescribe them taking some progesterone. And then so there has to be enough progesterone in place during the first trimester. Then after that first trimester, the placenta kicks in and begins to produce more progesterone to maintain that pregnancy through the rest of through full term until the baby is born as well. And of course in menopause, again, it's a natural process that all women go through. Usually happens late 40s to early 50s. And so what's important to know about menopause, I already talked about how essentially the ovaries are shutting down in their hormone production, but obviously the female body still needs a certain amount of these hormones. So there has to be something else that kicks in to help offer that hormone production. And so what it is, and what's important to understand, is that the adrenals or the adrenal glands are the backup to the ovaries. So the adrenal glands are these small glands that sit up on top of the kidneys, and again, they're the backup to the ovaries. So as the ovaries shut down on their hormone production, in theory, then the adrenals will kick in and produce a kind of constant, throughout the month now, a level supply of progesterone, estrogen, testosterone for the rest of your life. But here's the problem, and this is why so many women end up suffering with menopause symptoms, is because the adrenal glands also have the nickname of your main stress handling gland. And so what that means is the adrenals will kick in and produce hormones when your body's under stress. And it really doesn't matter if it's physical stress or emotional or mental or chemical stress. To the adrenals, it's all just stress. And what can happen over time of either kind of prolonged moderate stress, or if there is a time period of really intense stress, this can kind of fatigue or weaken the adrenals so that even before a woman goes into menopause, the adrenals are already kind of slower or weakened in their function. So as the ovaries shut down in their hormone production, the adrenals don't have the capacity to produce enough estrogen and progesterone and testosterone. So then these women go into menopause, the adrenals can't produce the hormones. So these are the women that the hormone levels drop the fastest when they go into menopause. And these are the women typically who suffer with the strongest of the menopause symptoms as well. So again, the adrenals are the backup to the ovaries. If a woman goes into menopause to where the adrenals are already weakened or fatigued even before starting menopause, it's almost a sure thing that that woman is going to be dealing with some menopause symptoms, maybe even some pretty significant menopause symptoms. So understanding that connection between adrenals and ovaries shutting down with menopause, that also gives you a clue into what a lot of women need to do in order to successfully kind of navigate menopause and or to help achieve hormone balance for the rest of your life after menopause. And a big part of it is in making sure that your adrenals are functioning well. So very, very important to understand that the adrenals are the backup to the ovaries. Adrenals have to be functioning good to have fewer menopause symptoms or to make sure that you have good hormone levels for the rest of your life after menopause. And then the last item here, sex drive or libido. This comes up fairly frequently as I talk to women on more of a one-on-one basis. And when we think about a lowered sex drive or a lower libido, my first thought is always with women is testosterone levels are getting too low. But there are women who test with normal testosterone in lab testing, and it turns out to be coming down to what's happening with the other hormones, estrogen and progesterone as well. But more than likely it's lower testosterone that's leading to a lower sex drive or a lower libido. So how can hormone balance affect so many things? It's important to know that hormones are one of the two main control systems within the body. So hormones circulate in the blood and can affect every single cell and every tissue within the body, including that of the brain and nervous system. So the other main control system in the body is the nervous system. So between the hormone systems and the nervous system, those two things control just about every single function within the body. Both of these systems are critical for normal body function, but there are two important differences between the nervous system and hormone systems. The first difference is you can think of the nervous system as almost like an on-off switch, meaning that we want the muscle to contract or we don't want it to contract. We want our eyes open or our eyes closed. We want to be going to the bathroom or not be going to the bathroom. So we need a system that will quickly shut things on and off, and that's essentially what the nervous system does. The hormone systems are quite a bit different in that hormones will more gradually turn on a function or gradually turn off a function, kind of like a dimmer switch, how you can kind of gradually turn on the brightness of a light or gradually turn it down. That's a better way of thinking of how hormones work. And it's not a perfect analogy because we do have some hormones that are very fast acting. If you get into a fight or flight situation, adrenaline kicks in. It's a very fast reaction. But in general, we need a system that will more gradually increase or gradually decrease functions, because we don't want a thyroid gland that's either functioning all the way on or functioning all the way off. We need something that's going to kind of modulate or gradually turn up or down a function like that as well. And so again, hormones will gradually turn functions on and off. The second difference between the nervous system and hormone systems is it's interesting that the human body has its own way of prioritizing how it's going to utilize the resources that you provide for it. So the resources I'm talking about are what you consume through vitamins, minerals, amino acids, fatty acids, enzymes, all the proteins, carbohydrates, all that kind of stuff. And so it's important to understand that your body will always prioritize these resources to make sure that the essential systems will function, even if it's at the sacrifice of non-essential systems. So here's what I mean. Essential systems meaning that they are essential for survival or for life and death. So we can definitely say that the brain and nervous system, that functioning is essential for you to be alive and for you to survive. And if a person is is consuming a diet that's not so healthy, we can just be blunt and say if they're consuming a fairly crappy diet that doesn't have a lot of good nutrients into it, then there's a more limited amount of resources that your body can use in order to keep your body functioning well. And so what this means is that the hormone systems get kind of put lower on a list of priority because in terms of being non-essential, meaning that you don't have to have a hormone balance in order for you to be alive, in order for you to survive. Your female hormones can be extremely out of balance and you can still be alive. It may not function as well, but you can still be alive. You can have a thyroid gland that essentially is non-functioning, but you can still be alive. It will not be probably a very pleasant, living, but your body will still be alive. And so the point here is that when there is a limited amount of healthy resources and good nutrients coming into your body will start to prioritize what it's going to do with that. And it will easily sacrifice the health and the balance of your hormone systems in order to keep these essential for life systems like your brain and nervous system functioning better. So other examples here, we think about essential systems, essential for survival or life or death. Certainly, if your heart stops working, then you're not going to be alive for very long. Same thing with the lungs, kidney, and liver. It's a matter of days. Without them functioning, it's only a matter of days before you're not going to be alive anymore. So your body will gladly sacrifice the health of your hormones and the balance of your hormones to keep these essential systems functioning better. It will also gladly break down muscle tissue if it needs those nutrients and resources to keep the essential systems functioning. It will gladly sacrifice the health of your skin and hair if it means that those resources can be used to keep the essential systems functioning better, and so on here as well. So what exactly is a hormone? Hormones are tiny microscopic particles that travel through the bloodstream and attach onto your cells. So in this diagram here, it's a kind of a close-up diagram, this larger blue circular thing. You see these little black pegs that are attached in here. You can think of that as hormones that are attaching onto the outside of the cell. And so it's important to understand that these hormones, they just don't attach anywhere. There's a very specific spot on the cell. It's called the receptor site. And so these hormones fit, it's almost like a key fitting into a lock. And so the key has to fit into the right lock or the right location on the cell, and then that can unlock a certain function or change some kind of function within that cell. So knowing that these hormone, if you want to call them like a molecule or a particle, can only attach on certain locations, it's not just as simple as having enough hormone in the system. It's also has to do with the health of the cells as well. So if the cells are not healthy, that outer layer may not have as many receptors. It might be more difficult, even if there's enough hormone in place, it might be more difficult for those hormones to kind of connect with the cell to offer the information it needs. So at the most basic level, hormones are messengers of information, and they're telling your cells and tissues to either increase or decrease some kind of function within that cell. So what are the hormone glands that we are talking about today? So certainly we're going to be talking about the ovaries. If you look at the ones that are highlighted in blue here, we'll talk quite a bit about the ovaries and the function of the ovaries. We've already talked a little bit about the adrenals. We'll talk a little bit about the thyroid gland, but towards the top of this diagram, you'll see the word hypothalamus and the pituitary as well. Pituitary has the nickname as the master hormone gland because that releases hormones that is essentially is talking to and telling the thyroid, adrenals, and ovaries how they need to be functioning. But really, if we go one step farther up in this control, the hypothalamus is really the beginning of the hormone communication within the body. And so over time, I've developed a really great appreciation for the importance of the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus is a small part of the brain. Like I said, it's the beginning of the hormone communication, but it's also this area of the brain that creates what we refer to as homeostasis, which is kind of a calm, even, steady state within the body. So people who are lacking a state of calm, it's quite possible that they have kind of a weakening or an imbalance that goes all the way up into the hypothalamus. And the best example I can give for you with this is I have many women that I talked to over the years where they struggle with anxiety, and they may even be on an anxiety medication to help offer some relief of that symptom. But what I've observed over the years is that when we give a targeted nutritional support, and you can do it this specifically with nutritional therapies where you can target this specifically an area of the body. When we give it a targeted nutritional support to the hypothalamus, I've seen many women where they're able to reduce or go off that anxiety medication because now their hypothalamus, which helps to control that calm, even steady state, is working better, and their body and their mind is in more of a state of calm. They're just not affected by the stresses as much as what they used to, and they just are not dealing with the anxiety. So I think that's an interesting observation, and it's something I'm kind of looking for as I work with women to help them out with their different concerns as well. Also in this diagram, you'll see the liver is shown here, and I think it's in this picture because the liver is not so much a hormone-producing gland. I think they're showing it in reference to where the adrenals and the kidneys and that are as well. But really, it's ironic that it's in the diagram because the liver is actually a very important organ when it comes to female hormone balance, because the liver is responsible for clearing out the excess hormones that build up into the body, and most specifically, when a woman is suffering with excess estrogen, or what we already called estrogen dominance, the liver is responsible for clearing out this excess estrogen. So if the liver has become lowered in its function, it's going to be more likely that these estrogen levels are going to start building up and increasing in the body and causing the symptoms of estrogen dominance, which we'll go over here in a little bit. Also, another factor, the liver, most people understand the liver as being the main organ of detoxification. And one among many things, one of the things that can cause an imbalance of female hormones is if toxin levels are building up too high in the body. So again, the liver, if it's underfunctioning, will allow estrogen levels to build up. It will allow toxins to build up, and further enhancing the hormone imbalance. So where do hormones actually come from? So looking at this diagram here, we see the beginning of the creation of hormones actually comes from cholesterol, and we look down the kind of the pathways, or where these arrows are pointing. From cholesterol gets created progesterone, DHEA, estrogen, testosterone, cortisol, all these hormones that we'll be talking about here. So it's kind of ironic, we're certainly given the impression in our society that cholesterol is kind of the enemy, and we need to get that number down. But we see that if cholesterol levels are too low, there's a chance that you may not be able to produce enough of the hormones that your body needs. So let me just step back and let's talk about cholesterol for a little bit. It's important to understand that in the original cholesterol research, which was done decades ago, certainly they found that when cholesterol levels go too high in the body, that there are some cardiovascular consequences, and strong enough consequences that could contribute to even having a heart attack and stroke or other cardiovascular problems. What they also found in the original cholesterol research, which you typically don't hear about, is that there's also a consequence when cholesterol levels go too low. And the main consequence to that being that with cholesterol levels that are too low, there is an obvious increase in the chances of developing cancer. And the reason why that is goes back in understanding the functions of cholesterol. So again, we're given the impression that cholesterol is the enemy. We got to get that number down. But cholesterol is necessary and serves many important functions. So we see here, cholesterol gets converted into many of the hormones that the body needs. Cholesterol is also, the brain and the nervous system, 60% of the brain is made up of fat and cholesterol. All the cells in your body are made up of fat and cholesterol. But more importantly, the connection between low cholesterol and the increased chance of getting cancer is that cholesterol itself is a pretty decent antioxidant. And you typically don't hear about this, but what an antioxidant does is it helps to protect your cells from getting damaged. So there are these things called free radicals. You can think of them as particles in your body that have the potential to come in contact with your cells and cause damage. So cholesterol can kind of deactivate these damaging particles that find their way into your body. But also, if cells do get damaged, cholesterol can be the hero and can come to the rescue and help repair that cell damage. So if cholesterol levels are too low, it's going to be more difficult for your body to protect your cells from damage. It's going to be more difficult for your cells to get repaired when they do become damaged. And cells in your body, they can get damaged only so many times before either that cell will die or that cell will become an abnormal cell, potentially a cancerous cell as well. So just know that low cholesterol can be as significant as high cholesterol. So then maybe the next obvious question is, well, what is low cholesterol? Typically, if you're getting about like low 50s, especially if you're getting down into the 140s or lower for total cholesterol and blood testing, you're definitely getting into too low of a cholesterol range, and that becomes a little bit more of a concern about how your cells are not as protected and or not getting repaired as easily if there's damage that occurs. So where does cholesterol actually come from? So it's important to know that about 75% of the cholesterol that is in your body is actually manufactured within by your own liver. So here again, we have a liver connection. We talked about how liver is so important for cleaning out toxins and for removing excess hormones. Well, here we see that the liver actually produces the majority of cholesterol that's within your body. And then again, that cholesterol is needed to create these hormones. And so again, we see kind of another way by which having good liver function is important for hormone balance. About 25% of cholesterol comes from your diet, and these percentages of 75 and 25 will vary a little bit based on the reference that you look at, but it's on average, it's around these ranges as well. So I want to pause for a moment and see if there are any questions. So again, you should see a column to the side. It's kind of a chat window. Go ahead and type in any questions that come to mind here, and I will pause just for a moment. So go ahead and type quick if you have a question here. While you're doing that, I'll touch on the topic of cholesterol medications or the statin medications. In that, then we have to question sometimes that when people are diagnosed with high cholesterol, the most common medical strategy when you go to a medical provider is that they will recommend a cholesterol-lowering medication or a statin medication. And the goal that I've seen of some providers are to actually drive down those cholesterol levels really low, and especially if there has already been a personal history of any kind of a cardiovascular problem, they're even more concerned about getting those cholesterol levels really low. And so it's just an idea to keep in mind for yourself or people that you know, for your close family and people that you care about, that there can be some consequences to cholesterol levels also being too low. Okay, so no one's typed in a question, so I'm going to move on. You can type in, so here's a comment. Deborah is saying that she's always had lower cholesterol, about 130s, 140s, so how do you bring it up? So the concern then goes back into remembering that the majority of cholesterol in your body actually comes from within, from your own liver. And so this brings to mind the immediate question, if maybe your liver is underfunctioning and maybe has been underfunctioning for quite a long period of time, and that does happen. I've seen that happen many times. And so that's my first thought process, is to make sure that the right testing gets done for your liver function to see if that's where the problem is at. And if that's the case, again, we can target a organ like the liver very specifically with certain nutritional products to help increase that function. And I've seen it several times where people, when I do the initial lab testing, they test too low in cholesterol, and I tell them they're actually cholesterol deficient, which is a term that you're not going to hear very often. And once I provide some recommendations and they follow those recommendations to support the liver, maybe their cholesterol goes from 130 and jumps up to 160 or 180 within a few months, and I'm thinking, wow, you know, most people might be alarmed that their cholesterol is jumping up, but I'm thinking, now we have enough cholesterol in your system to help protect your cells, to produce the hormones that you need, and that's a much healthier place to be. So Tina's asking a question here. So would you suggest possibly treating for hormone balance in order to also treat thyroidism? So I guess you mean hypothyroidism. There is definitely a direct connection between what's going on with female hormones and how that's affecting thyroid. So that brings up an interesting point in that I was going to get to this later, but I'll talk about it now, that when the body is in estrogen dominance, estrogen in excess has a very direct effect on suppressing thyroid function. And so, in my own opinion, for a lot of women that end up becoming hypothyroid later in life, I suspect that this actually started out as a female hormone imbalance earlier in life, to where their body was either dominated by too much estrogen or not enough progesterone, and that estrogen dominance kind of very gradually started putting pressure or stress on the thyroid, and eventually suppressed at the point where a woman ends up testing hypothyroid in lab testing. This also brings up another interesting thought, that it's also important to know for yourself, or if you have kids that are daughters as well, that any woman who is on some form of hormone birth control pill, that will automatically throw the body into estrogen dominance right away for as long as a woman is taking that birth control hormone type medication or pill. And so with that in mind, obviously, there are many reasons why women will take birth control, whether it's to prevent birth, or a lot of times it can be prescribed to deal with some more severe, monthly cycles or menstruation problems. But there is possibly a longer-term consequence when it comes to thyroid function, is that the body is automatically thrown into estrogen dominance. That excess estrogen will have a direct effect on suppressing thyroid function, and I think for a lot of women this leads into what becomes their thyroid problem down the road. Karen has a question here. I said, you said it was something about the hypothalamus that can reduce people from having hypothyroidism. What is it? Well, the connection between the hypothalamus and the thyroid function, again, is the hypothalamus is the beginning of the hormone communication throughout the entire body. So the hypothalamus communicates to the pituitary, which communicates to the thyroid. So if the hypothalamus is struggling, you have the beginning of the hormone communication. It might actually filter down and affect all the hormone systems. There might be consequences not just to the thyroid, but also to the adrenals and also to the ovaries as well. I'm going to clear out those questions, and go ahead as you think of other questions. Even while I'm talking, you can type them in, and I'll come back to that here in a little bit. So now let's get into the details of female hormone balance, starting with what is considered normal in terms of hormone balance. So this diagram shows what would be considered textbook normal. And so we see at the bottom here a normal, and so again, this will be for a woman who is still having a monthly cycle, so not a woman that's gone into menopause. So for women that are still having a monthly cycle, the textbook normal is a 28-day cycle. This means, though, that if you're not a 28-day cycle, it doesn't mean that you're abnormal. Let's say you've always been a 26-day cycle, and that's just been the case for you forever, then that is your normal. So there are variations on normal, but textbook normal is the 28 days. If you start getting down into kind of lower 20s, then I would question that as not being normal for any woman. There's something else going on there. But there's slight variations to normal. And when you look at that month-long cycle, typically we'll break that down between a first half and a second half. So the first half being the first 2 weeks of the first 14 days, and then the second half obviously being the other 14 days. And so if you look in the middle of this diagram where it shows ovary and it's showing these lines for estrogen and progesterone, what's important to know is in the first half of the monthly cycle, it is normal to have estrogen be more the dominant hormone. In relation to progesterone, it's more the dominant hormone in the first half of the cycle. And then we see as we get towards the end of that first half of the cycle, we get a pretty strong spike or increase in estrogen. And this is important because this spike in estrogen is part of what helps to stimulate ovulation or stimulate a normal release of the egg from the ovary. But then, once that happens, what we see when we look at the diagram is pretty quickly estrogen levels drop down, which is that solid line. And then we see a pretty quick reversal where that dotted line, which is progesterone, is now more the dominant hormone in the entire second half of the monthly cycle. So this is a very important concept to understand, that estrogen, it's normal to have more estrogen in the first half, and what should be happening is there should be more progesterone in the second half. For women, when I'm doing hormone testing where their progesterone levels drop down too quickly in the second half, maybe the progesterone levels increase, but then maybe that last full week before the next period begins, which would be day 1 of the cycle, maybe progesterone drops down. These are the women that are most likely to communicate to me that they get the variety of PMS symptoms. Could be most often it's more moody. It could be a little bit of spotting or abnormal bleeding before the period actually starts. And so as far as what's actually happening with ovulation, in the first half of the cycle, you have actually multiple kind of immature ovaries that we would call a follicle are kind of maturing, and then usually you'll have just one. Sometimes it'll happen to be more than one, but usually just one will ovulate. So it's important to understand that you need to have a complete ovulation. You need to have a complete release of the egg out of the ovary in order to have enough progesterone, because it's not just the egg that gets released. There is this other kind of leftover material when that egg gets released that's called the corpus luteum, which is kind of a weird name, but it's that corpus luteum that offers the majority of progesterone production in the second half of the cycle. So what that means is that for women that are not having a complete ovulation, so maybe that egg is kind of maturing, it's moving to the outside of the ovary, but it never actually gets released. It just kind of sits on the outside of the ovary. What that means is because that egg is not released, that woman gets shorted in her progesterone production for that month. And then if that happens the next month and the next month, now we have a chronic lower progesterone production as well. And we'll talk about some of the consequences between estrogen and progesterone as well. Also, I use this analogy of when the egg is maturing and it gets to the outside of the ovary, but it never actually gets released. If it just sits there without getting released from the ovary, this is what we call an ovarian cyst. And if this happens again, month after month after month, now you start having multiple ovarian cysts, and if this progresses over a period of years, this can lead into the condition that's referred to as PCOS, or polycystic ovarian syndrome. We'll talk a little bit more about that later as well. So just so I don't forget, I did send to everyone who was registered for the webinar, I did send a link to print out a handout on estrogen and progesterone. It also talks about testosterone in there as well. And I thought instead of going through all the different functions, I would provide this kind of handout to you, because a lot of women like this, because they'll look at this and you'll see when you look at the handout, you'll see estrogen, and we'll talk about the symptoms of estrogen excess and symptoms of estrogen deficiency, and the same for progesterone. And so what you can do in this handout, if you print it out, you can actually take a highlighter or a pencil and you can circle those symptoms that apply to you, and then you can start to see the pattern within just those symptoms if you are leaning more towards estrogen dominance or estrogen excess or progesterone deficiency. You'll see some of those symptoms are kind of the same between those. So that'd be one indicator for you for kind of getting an idea of what's going on with your hormone levels. Tina's asking the question, will I be providing the PowerPoint presentation? I normally don't give a copy of the actual presentation. I will likely be doing the presentation again sometime in the future, and so it'll be another opportunity to listen in, or if you know somebody that you think would benefit from hearing this information. So this is what's happening with hormone levels, what should be happening with hormone levels, what's happening within the ovaries, but let's talk about what's going on within the uterus. So we see in the lower part of this diagram where it says uterus, again, keep in mind that estrogen is more of a kind of a stimulating, and you can think of estrogen as a tissue growth stimulating kind of hormone. And this is necessary because within the uterus, we want more estrogen to be there in the first half of the cycle, because we want the inner lining of the uterus, the endometrial tissue, we want that tissue to be growing to be a nice, healthy tissue, because if a woman does ovulate and if that egg gets fertilized, we want that egg to implant on some really nice, healthy, nourishing uterine tissue. And so if there's not enough estrogen in place, then there can't be that nourishing uterine tissue as well. And then the role that progesterone plays in the second half of the cycle is progesterone helps to keep that uterine tissue intact. And so what happens is if a woman is low in progesterone, then what will happen is this uterine tissue will start to break off. And so this is the connection between women who maybe have difficulty getting pregnant or have difficulty maintaining a pregnancy, especially if they're having miscarriages in the first trimester, is very often these are women who are low on progesterone. And so what that means is that this uterine tissue that's shown in the second half of the cycle is not staying intact very well. It's not able to kind of feed or sustain that fertilized egg, and it makes it much more difficult to have a successful pregnancy as well. It also means that for women, maybe not even related to the pregnancy, but for women who are too low in progesterone levels, again, in the first half, uterine lining's building up, and progesterone, when it's high enough, keeps it in place. But if progesterone levels are too low, these are the women who often will explain that they, even outside the time of their normal, what they describe as their period, they will get spotting either before or after, and it's usually because there's not enough progesterone in place. This also means that if there's too much estrogen within the body in the situation we refer to as estrogen dominance, when the body is dominated by too much estrogen, it means that in the first half of the cycle, we will often get excessive buildup of that inner lining of the uterus. And so when we finish the monthly cycle and the period begins, the uterus now has this extra challenge of contracting to remove not just the normal amount of uterine tissue, but contracting to remove excessive amounts of uterine tissue. So these are the women that will tend to get much stronger cramping that will happen at the time of their period. The uterus is having to contract even harder to try to remove this extra buildup of the uterine lining. And we want that to get removed on a monthly basis, because what happens if it doesn't all get removed, then it will sit in there and it will have to wait until the next cycle is done and the next period begins, and we'll have to contract even harder. And so these are the women that get more kind of clotting that will appear with their menses or with their menstrual cycle. It's not just bleeding, but they actually get clotting that will come out. That usually reflects uterine lining from the previous month or previous months that did not get removed properly. And again, it means that the uterus is going to have to contract even harder to remove that excessive inner lining of the uterus as well. Tina's asking, we spoke about excessive estrogen levels. Is it possible to have problems with too much progesterone, such as interstitial cystitis? Well, you can say as a general statement that when it comes to hormones, there's always a range of what's considered normal. And so if there's too much of a particular hormone or too little, there's going to be consequences. Even when we think about progesterone as more of a kind of a calming, kind of balancing, helpful type hormone, especially in balancing out estrogen, too much progesterone can actually cause even some of the same symptoms as too much estrogen as well. The same thing is with any hormone in your body. Too much, too little thyroid hormone, there's problems. The adrenal glands produces over 50 different hormones. Too much or too little of those hormones can cause a variety of different problems. So here's an example of hormone testing on a patient of mine. This is from quite a while ago. And so this will kind of lead us into some different ways that we can do hormone testing. Typically, when I'm doing testing on a female who is still having a monthly cycle, I will often more likely do what's referred to as saliva hormone testing versus doing a blood sample. And so doing a blood sample for female hormone testing with a woman who's still having a monthly cycle, there's a couple of disadvantages in doing blood testing. One of them is a lot of times you're gathering that blood sample but it's only on one day of a month-long 28-day cycle. And so part of it depends on the timing of when you gather that sample. And it can tell you what's going on that one day, but it's really very difficult to extrapolate out what's happening the rest of the time. If you happen to draw blood on what would be maybe a good day in the first half of the cycle, you might be missing some important, imbalances that are going on in the second half. So that's one drawback. The other drawback is that if you want to do more accurate testing doing blood, well, then you need to be going in every 2 to 3 days over the month to get your blood drawn, and that's something that most people just aren't going to do. It's a major inconvenience, and it's just, the idea of going and get a needle poked in your arm, 10 or 12 times over the month is not one that would appeal to a lot of people. So this is why, the other reason, kind of the weakness of blood testing is very often when I have women that I'll consult with, when they show me some blood testing they've had for female hormones, I find very often medically they are not testing for what I refer to as the free form of the hormone. Very often, and so the difference is the free form of the hormone means that it's kind of the active form of the hormone. It's the form of the hormone that is actually ready to communicate to your cells, to transmit the information and have the effect on your body. Very often in blood testing, they're testing the inactive form of the hormone. So the hormone is bound to something. It's not in its active form, and we don't really know. A lot of times that the hormone's already been used and it's on its way out of the body. So really, when you look at what's going to be more sensitive of a testing, the saliva hormone testing is always testing for the free form of the hormone. Plus, with saliva hormone testing, it's much, much easier to gather multiple samples over a month-long cycle. And the way this works is it's a small box kit that will, a person will take home or it will get shipped out to them at home. And basically, you gather the first saliva sample on the first day of your period. And then every 2 to 3 days after, you gather a new sample of saliva. Each time you gather your saliva sample, you just put them in the freezer. You keep putting them all into the freezer until you have all your samples. And then when you have all your samples, you put it back into the box and ship it out, and then they will analyze it. So much more accurate and much more convenient to do it that way as well. So anyways, here's an example of a female who came to me, and her primary symptom of concern was migraines, which predictably happened in relation to her monthly cycle. And, she was, for many years, could almost just bet on the fact that, or just kind of count on the fact that that's when her migraine was going to happen, as she got closer to her period. So we see, the top part of the diagram, I'm still showing estrogen and progesterone, what's considered textbook normal. Let's take a look at her lab testing. This is doing the saliva hormone testing. So this top line that has the red squares, these are her estrogen levels, and we see it is where we would expect it to be in the first half of the cycle, where it is more kind of dominant, so to speak, in relation to progesterone. And about mid-cycle, we do get a spike of estrogen like we would want to see, which helps to stimulate ovulation. But then we get into the second half. So after day 13, we see here estrogen levels should be dropping down, and they kind of go back up again. So overall, estrogen levels look fairly normal compared to the diagram above. But then we look at progesterone levels, which is the lower line with the green circles. It is the lower hormone in the first half of the cycle, but what we should see, just after we see that spike in estrogen, we should see that progesterone levels pretty rapidly decrease and essentially overtake and become dominant over a progesterone level. So what we see for her, if we look at day 18, is the only day where it just barely, increases over, it really just kind of matches what's happening. So here's an example of a woman who is not only low in progesterone in the second half of her cycle. I would say when I look at the first half, she's actually low in the first half. So here's a woman who is chronically deficient or chronically low in her progesterone levels. And so part of her therapy was to, just because of how extremely low she was in progesterone, part of her recommendation was to go ahead and get her going, with my help, get her going on what's referred to as a bioidentical or natural progesterone. And I had her actually taking it the whole time. And even within a month of doing that, I consulted with her again, and her migraines, they hadn't gone away, but even just after a month, the severity and the frequency of her migraines had decreased. And that continued to be the case month after month, a decrease in her migraines. I think for her there were other factors involved, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. There are actually 4 things that I think about for women that have migraines. We'll get into that a little bit later. So here's the rest of the hormone testing for that woman who was dealing with migraines, just to show you that the saliva hormone testing also will show you DHEA levels. So DHEA is what is created by the adrenals, and this is what will get converted into estrogen. So I'd like to know what's going on with DHEA, because this will be a good indicator if a person's adrenals are kind of weakened in their function or what's going on with that. So we see here her value, she measured at 3, the reference range is 3 to 10, so she's definitely borderline low. And so probably part of her hormone imbalance is the fact that her adrenals are weakened in their function. So this is someone who, without making any kind of changes, is likely going to be experiencing some pretty major menopause symptoms when she gets to the time, her biological time of going into menopause. This also is testing for free testosterone. Again, the saliva testing is always testing for the free form of the hormone. And normal range is 10 to 38. She's 14, so she's still lower than what I would like her to be. And so she's actually low in progesterone, she's low in DHEA, she's lower than ideal in testosterone. She's low in a lot of her different hormones as well. Here's an example of doing the saliva hormone testing for a woman who is already gone into menopause, a post-menopausal hormone test. And so when a woman goes into menopause, we now do not need to gather multiple saliva samples over the month-long cycle, because there is no month-long cycle. In theory, the hormone levels are remaining constant throughout the entire month, throughout the entire year, throughout the rest of a woman's life. So with this, we can just gather a single saliva sample. And here we see, so to give you a little bit of background, this is a woman who came to me, and she was having such severe menopause symptoms that they would get so bad at times she told me that she would actually pass out. She would actually go unconscious because of how severe her menopause symptoms were. So looking at her hormone testing, we see DHEA again as an indicator of adrenal function was even lower than the previous test that we look at. And so clearly here is somebody whose adrenals are functioning at a very low level, which again, the adrenals are the backup to the ovaries. So if a woman goes into menopause, the ovaries shut down, the adrenals are not functioning very well. It's almost a sure thing that these are the women who are going to suffer with the more severe menopause symptoms. And this difference here, you look at this, her value or number was at a 1. The reference range is 3 to 10, but in the unit of measurement, the difference between 3 and 1 is actually a big difference. It's a pretty major decrease in adrenal function that's happening for her. We look at her testosterone levels, they're still at the low end of the normal range. We see her estrogen levels. This actually measures 3 different kinds of estrogen. And these are the 3 most common forms. There's actually other forms of estrogen in the body as well, but these are the 3 most common forms of estrogen, and of which one is clearly showing to be low. And then progesterone, it's a little bit hard to read on this result here, but her value measured at 28, and in the lab's reference ranges, without being on hormone replacement, that looks normal, but really, for optimal function, we really want the progesterone to be more in the 100 or 200 range. So she's quite a bit lower than what's considered optimal. So here's a woman who's essentially low, again, in all of her hormones, and this really gives a lot of clarity as to why she's suffering from the severe menopause symptoms, and also tells us part of the problem is the adrenals. And so her success in feeling better during menopause, but also having a healthier body as she continues to age throughout the rest of her life, is getting her adrenals to be functioning better. And again, just like we can target the hypothalamus, so we can target the liver, we can target the adrenals in a very specific way to help improve their function. So let me go over a couple more questions here. Amy is asking, she's saying, I believe I am in perimenopause. As for the last year, I've been experiencing hot flashes, a lovely acne beard, and abnormal periods. I am currently on day 28 of bleeding. Is this normal? So this is definitely not normal. Although, as women go into perimenopause, which can be that year or two before going into menopause, a lot of times women get more severe, more strange in what's going on with their monthly cycle. And so is it normal? It's definitely not normal. Is it common? I guess the women I see, they're coming to me because they have hormone problems. So it is a fairly common thing to start noticing more imbalance or more issues. So the concern then is if you're on day 28 of menstrual bleeding, the concern is that if you're actually becoming anemic as well. And so there are ways to stop this or control this. We have to know, first of all, what exactly is going on with hormone levels. We need to know if this is happening because progesterone levels are too low or estrogen levels are just that high for you, and there are ways that we can balance that. There are also things that can be done nutritionally to help prevent the uterus from bleeding so much as well. There are some specific strategies to help that along at the same time. Lisa is asking, I just saw my gynecologist last week. I asked her about testing my estrogen levels, and she told me that wasn't possible. Oh, really? I am wondering why she would tell me that. I have no idea, because any doctor knows you can test these hormones just in regular blood testing. But again, blood testing, they're usually testing for, I would say, the non-free form of the hormone, so it's the inactive form of the hormone. So it's just not as sensitive a way of testing versus the saliva testing, which is always testing for the free form of the hormone. Understand that you can test for the free form of the hormone in blood testing, and it confuses me why medical providers just don't do that. Maybe it's just their understanding of the way that they're trained, but you can usually test for the free form of the hormone in blood testing as well. And Amy also commented, along with her 28 days of menstrual cycle and hot flashes and getting more acne and abnormal periods, getting a major weight gain as well. So, yeah, again, when you look at the female hormones, estrogen, when that becomes too high, estrogen is kind of a tissue stimulating type of hormone, but estrogen is also a fat storing hormone. So when the body is dominated by more estrogen, these are the women that are going to gain weight more easily or have more difficulty losing weight. But then, to add to that, if at the same time as estrogen levels being too high, if progesterone levels are too low, when we bring those progesterone levels up, progesterone is essentially a fat-burning type hormone, in that it puts the body in a position where it can more easily lose weight and keep that weight off. So there's a connection between estrogen and progesterone and what's going on with body weight. Estrogen is a fat-storing hormone. When progesterone levels are too low, and you get the progesterone levels back up to normal, then the body is positioned where it can be much more successful in losing that excess body weight and keeping that weight off. So now let's get into the details of the many things that can cause female hormone imbalance. Actually, someone else just typed in the question. This is Catherine. She's saying, I've been menopausal for the past 2 years with no periods. So that's important to understand. The true definition of menopause is 12 consecutive months without a monthly cycle. So I've had women that will get to month 10 or 11, and all of a sudden they have their period, and guess what? The count starts over. Unfortunately, it was kind of a fake out. And she's saying, Catherine's saying, I haven't suffered from hot flashes. I've always felt fatigued. About 8 months ago, my primary care provider diagnosed me with being hypothyroid, which is pretty common if there's some female hormone imbalance, and put me on thyroid medication. 3 months ago, I began having my period again. My gynecologist put me on progesterone and suggested a hormone imbalance. Now I feel even more fatigued. She's asking me about suggestions with this. So It's important to know that these different hormone systems, the thyroid, the adrenals, the ovaries, there's a lot of communication that's always taking place between all of these. So an imbalance of one area kind of filters down and can start to imbalance the others. And so it's not unusual to have a woman who is feeling more fatigued. She gets diagnosed with hypothyroid, gets put on a thyroid medication, and all of a sudden there's some other kind of hormone change. So in Catherine's case, her periods came back. In fact, there are some women who there's such a strong connection between thyroid and ovaries and reproductive function that some women, they're actually having difficulty getting pregnant because of their thyroid problem. So once you balance the thyroid, then you start getting a little bit more normal function of the ovaries, a little bit better hormone production. So that's what I suspect happened here is the ovaries were kind of weakened in their function as in the way that they communicate with the thyroid. The thyroid, you take a thyroid medication, you get more thyroid hormone in the body. That kind of improved how the ovaries were functioning as well, improved some of that hormone production from the ovaries, and maybe got her a little bit closer to normal, maybe not back to normal, but a little bit better in her hormone production, and that caused her monthly cycle to kick back into gear. So in your case, Catherine, I would suspect that you went into menopause maybe at a little bit earlier than normal age, and of course I don't know about you, and I don't know how old you are, but this is what I see with other women. Is they tell me, I'm in my mid 40s or early 40s, and am experiencing, and basically gone into menopause. It's possible that that these women go into menopause earlier than what their biological intent was, what their body was intending to go into, and so once I start working with them and help balance their body and balance their hormones, they might actually get their cycle back because it was too early. It's not until late 40s or early 50s is when their body normally should be going into menopause. And so essentially their body chemistry or hormones are back on track to what would be considered normal as well. And she's saying Catherine's saying she's 56. That's a little unusual. That may be something that we'd have to talk about on a one-on-one basis to go into more detail about your situation with that, Catherine. So this diagram, I will jokingly say, is worth the price of admission, and obviously it doesn't cost anything to come to this webinar, but it's understanding that as I go through this, you're going to understand how things are really closely connected. And if all I did was go over this and I ended the seminar or the webinar at this point, I almost wouldn't have to go through the rest of this because you kind of know how the rest of this seminar will go or webinar will go. But let's use this as a starting point here where it's talking about just kind of to the right and a little bit up from the yellow kind of frowning face there, where it shows decreased ovarian function, increased ovarian cyst, and increased PCOS. So again, when a woman is not having a complete ovulation, she ends up getting shorted in her progesterone production. And that incomplete ovulation can often lead to an ovarian cyst, because that's what an ovarian cyst is an egg that was never released from the ovary. And if this happens month after month after month, then this can lead to, over a period of years, can lead to what's referred to as PCOS or polycystic ovarian syndrome. So if we backtrack from there, if we go kind of backwards up into the upper left corner, if we start with high carb, high glycemic index, here we're going to talk about the connection between diet and how this affects hormone balance. So with a high carb, high sugar, high glycemic index refers to a number given to food based on how high this is going to cause your blood sugar levels to go. And so with the higher carb, high sugar, high glycemic index, what that does, if you look at the arrow that's pointing kind of down at an angle, this increases blood sugar levels, and the body doesn't like it when blood sugar levels are going higher for a longer period of time. So this will force the body or force the pancreas to produce more insulin. The problem is, as your body is producing more and more insulin to deal with the higher sugar, higher carbohydrate intake, we know that elevated insulin has a direct effect on suppressing normal ovulation. And again, what that means is with suppressing normal ovulation means that the egg does not get released from the ovary. That results in an ovarian cyst. A woman gets shorted in her progesterone production. So here's the connection, that with a high carb, high sugar diet, that this pushes insulin levels to go up. That will suppress normal ovulation. Because that will short a woman in her progesterone production, if we go down from where it talks about, to the right-hand side where it talks about ovarian cyst and PCOS, we go down to where it says excess estrogen, just to the right of the yellow frowning face, then that's what this is with getting shorted in progesterone production. Now we have the imbalance where the body is now dominated by too much estrogen, or we simply have too much estrogen getting produced. The consequence to that is, among the different symptoms that estrogen dominance will create is, we already talked about how excess estrogen has a direct effect on suppressing thyroid function. Well then, with a lower functioning thyroid, I don't show it on the diagram here, but if you were to pretend that the lines were going down from there, with a lowered thyroid function, that will slow down a woman's metabolism. That will make it easier to gain weight, specifically gain more body fat. And we now know that excess body fat produces more estrogen. So that puts us back up above here where it says excess estrogen, which then will suppress thyroid function even more, which will then cause even more weight gain and more body fat, which produces more estrogen, which suppresses thyroid even more. So here's one of the big connections between estrogen dominance and thyroid function. This goes back to my earlier comment that I think a lot of women who end up becoming hypothyroid, it actually started out as a female hormone imbalance for them as well. Also, we'll see here in the bottom right-hand side where it says decreased thyroid function, and the arrow goes over to adrenal function. There's a lot of communication that takes place between the thyroid and the adrenals, in that if the thyroid starts to struggle and lower in its function, the adrenals will try to work a little bit harder to pick up the slack, but the adrenals can only do that for so long before the adrenals start to weaken in their function too. And then we already talked about how a lowered or weakened adrenal function, these are the women that when they go into menopause are most likely to suffer the stronger menopausal symptoms as well. Also on this diagram, if we just go straight across the top here, we see how high carb, high glycemic index will cause blood sugar levels to increase, which increases insulin, and that can lead to insulin resistance. So the cells in your body, when the cells keep getting bombarded by more and more insulin, the cells can actually get resistant to the effect of insulin. So the sugar stays out in the blood for a longer period of time. But the body doesn't like that. So the body and the pancreas pushes even more insulin into the bloodstream, and it's almost like it will overproduce insulin, and it really will then more dramatically push that blood sugar into the cells, but then it happens too fast, and then a person's blood sugar levels drop down, and they start getting a hypoglycemic reaction. And so people who are dealing with hypoglycemia, or maybe it's kind of a reactive hypoglycemia, these are people that could be on track to eventually developing adult onset diabetes as well. So that's a little bit of a warning sign, a little bit of a red flag. If you notice for yourself that if you go too long between meals, that you start to get like low blood sugar, you can get a little shaky, a little weak, get a little bit headachy. The symptoms are different for each person, but that means that you're starting to have some difficulty controlling blood sugars, and we want to make sure that we get that under control. And the consequence of not getting that under control could also be contributing to the hormone balance, the female hormone imbalance as well. So this is the kind of pathway of how diet will affect what's going on with female hormone balance. Let's backtrack to this just to the right and a little bit up from the yellow frowning face here, where it talks about PCOS. So again, polycystic ovarian syndrome is when there is the incomplete ovulation month after month after month, possibly happening for many, many years, and really getting a really kind of lumpy, bumpy appearance to the ovary itself. Sometimes the ovary will also enlarge to be quite a bit larger than its normal size. So knowing that there's such a strong dietary connection and also knowing that for kids, for girls even at a young age, either through the parents' choice or the parents' lack of knowledge, these young girls are getting fed a lot of carbohydrate, sugary kinds of things, which at a very young age are affecting insulin getting pushed higher. And so then what that could mean is that as soon as a young girl gets into her teens, as soon as she hits puberty and starts having a monthly cycle, her body might already be positioned where she's not getting the complete ovulation and therefore is getting shorted in progesterone production. And right from the beginning, and I talk with these young girls too, because their moms will bring them in to see me, that right from the very beginning of their monthly cycle, from puberty when they start having a monthly cycle, it's already a pretty negative, sometimes a pretty awful experience. So it's hard for me to, I can only imagine that, in their mind they're probably thinking about how they're going to be dealing with this for the next, 40 years probably, and how that's got to be kind of a depressing thought for them to be dealing with these really uncomfortable abnormal cycles even from a very, very young age as well. So what are the chances of improving polycystic ovarian syndrome, which the longer consequence of that is for a lot of women is they become infertile, they can't get pregnant because they're not ovulating, there's not enough progesterone there to maintain the pregnancy. What are the odds that they're going to be able to improve that and be able to get pregnant if there's not a strong focus on what's happening with diet? I would say it's going to be extremely difficult. And this is why you'll see some women when they are diagnosed with PCOS and blood sugars are an issue, a lot of times they'll get put on medications like metformin and they'll try to get blood sugars down, or that might actually be a strategy for them to try and get pregnant is to put them on metformin or other things that will help lower blood sugars as well. So also in the bottom left corner, let's look at the connection of stress here as well. So again, the adrenals are also called the main stress handling gland. And so when a person is under higher stress, the adrenals will produce this hormone called cortisol, which is also called the stress hormone. And with higher stress, cortisol levels will go up, and cortisol levels going up will also cause blood sugars to increase, which will also cause insulin levels to increase, which then can suppress normal ovulation, which will result in excess estrogen, which will suppress thyroid function, which can result in weight gain and more body fat. So again, there is definitely a strong stress connection. And so I'm sure none of you listening to this have any stress in your life, right? So of course we all do. And if you combine that with a diet that has a lot of carbohydrates, a lot of sugary things, and that's kind of a double whammy, so to speak, it makes it even more likely that that these women are going to suffer with abnormal female hormone balance as well. Deborah is asking a question, does that also control cysts in the breast tissue as well, talking about breast cysts or fibrocystic breast disease. So there is definitely a connection there. And so what you want to understand is that when the female body is dominated by too much estrogen, that estrogen gets at high levels stored within the breast tissue and in the uterine tissue. So, and again, estrogen is more of a tissue growth stimulating kind of growth type of hormone. So as more estrogen gets stored in the breast tissue, that can promote the formation of abnormal cell growth in the breast tissue, which can lead to breast cysts. Or it could be many breast cysts. I've talked to women where their breasts are just essentially filled with these cysts and, becoming the diagnosis of fibrocystic breast disease. And it's because of the excess estrogen and the lack of progesterone to balance that out. So there is a direct contribution of excess estrogen to the breast cyst. And then if we talk about the uterus, with excess estrogen, not only is that going to have the uterus create too much buildup of that inner lining of the uterus in the monthly cycle, so a woman's uterus is going to have to contract even harder during her period to try to get rid of that excessive uterine lining. But also within the kind of the muscle of the uterus, that can stimulate abnormal cell growth, and that can become the uterine fibroid. So women who have breast cysts or uterine fibroids, even without doing lab testing, it's almost a sure thing that these are women that are estrogen dominant. Their body is dominated by either too much estrogen, not enough progesterone, or a combination of both. Here's a diagram. I like to create diagrams, and I'm a very visual person. I know a lot of people are as well, and so I created this a while ago. It's not really maybe my current way of thinking, but the thing I want to point out here, and it might be a little bit hard to see on your computer screen. So this is called the 7 categories that will decrease your quality of life or shorten your lifespan, and this is actually one of the pages that's in the handout. And by the way, if you didn't see that email or you don't have that handout, you can at any time you can go back into my website. It's healingchoices.com. Click on the tab for the free webinar, and on that page, towards the bottom of that page, there'll be a link where you can download and print that out if you want to. And so this here shows the 7 categories, and they're not necessarily in order of importance, but I would say of top importance is the issue of toxins. And of the different kinds of toxins, I would easily say that the toxic heavy metals are among the most damaging to your body. And as I am working with women, and actually working with anyone with health issues, I will very frequently have them do what's called a heavy metal screening test. It's a small little box kit. It's not that expensive, and the reason why I will frequently test for toxic heavy metals is because you think about all the different chemicals and toxins that we get exposed to during our lifetime, because it's almost impossible to avoid this exposure in some cases. The toxic heavy metals are easily the most damaging to the brain and nervous system and the most disruptive to hormone systems. And so especially the thyroid is super sensitive to the presence of toxic heavy metals, where these heavy metals will actually get stored within the thyroid tissue and really greatly affect thyroid function, oftentimes leading into an autoimmune type of thyroid problem. But it will also greatly impact female hormone balance. And this was a great example of this was presented to me many, many years ago by a woman who came to this same seminar as an in-person seminar when I was doing it. And she came in to see me for the initial consultation, and the first thing we did was to do the heavy metal screening test that came back positive. For her, it was cadmium, and I think it was mercury, or there was one other one that had shown up for her as well, but cadmium was the dominant toxic heavy metal. And for that first month, that was really the only therapy that we were doing. It's a fairly simple therapy to work on getting these toxic elements out of the body. And prior to seeing me, she was having her period every 2 weeks. But after a month of doing this removal of the toxic heavy metals, after a month, she was already back to a 28-day cycle. So that really, set in my mind, and I always knew of the importance, but that was just a great example of a real-life example of how removing these toxic heavy metals can have a huge impact on what's happening with the balance of hormones, and specifically the balance of the female hormones. Lynn is asking a question here, what is an example of a toxic heavy metal? So these would be things like mercury, cadmium, lead, arsenic, aluminum. The heavy metal screening test will check for 6 of the more common ones, which are cadmium, mercury, lead. It's nickel, copper, and zinc are the ones that it will test for. And typically, if it comes back positive with one of those, there's probably other ones in the body at the same time. And so, just wanted to introduce that idea of, for many different reasons, removing these toxic elements can have a huge impact on the brain and nervous system, on the balance of hormones, on metabolism, and having a better metabolism. And so let's talk a little bit about estrogen dominance. So estrogen dominance is a term for too much estrogen in the body or not enough progesterone to balance out that estrogen. Again, it's the ratio of the two that's most important. So a woman could actually test with normal estrogen levels, but if her progesterone is too low, her body is still behaving as if it is estrogen dominant because there's not enough progesterone to balance out that estrogen. It's easiest to think of estrogen as a stimulating hormone to the body and to the nervous system, and progesterone has more of a calming effect. There are several types of estrogen in the body. Estrogen dominance usually occurs because not enough progesterone is being produced within the body, or we're all exposed to estrogen-like compounds from our environment and even from personal care products that we use that are causing our estrogen levels to increase. So now, essentially, we're getting into problems or symptoms that relate to either too much estrogen or not enough progesterone, or could be even not enough estrogen as well. So PMS or menstrual issues, again, this will most often be when we talked about how in the second half of the monthly cycle is when progesterone should be the dominant hormone. When I do the lab testing and those progesterone levels drop down too quickly, these are typically the women that will describe that have these different PMS type symptoms. So there are different theories about what causes PMS. Almost always some kind of hormone imbalance. Usually it's estrogen dominance or progesterone deficiency, usually tied in with high carbohydrate, sugar intake, causing insulin resistance. And again, that excess insulin will suppress normal ovulation. There can be other deficiencies involved with that as well. It's likely a combination of some of these different things. Ovarian cysts, we've already talked about that in quite a bit of detail, so I think I'm not going to go through this, through every single bullet point here, but so here it talks about causes. Officially, the cause is still considered to be unknown, but we've already talked about this. We really know what the causes are. It usually comes back to diet and incomplete ovulation as the most common cause. Sometimes they can resolve on their own. And then obviously if the incomplete ovulation forming an ovarian cyst, if that's happening month after month after month and year after year, then this can lead to what's called polycystic ovarian syndrome. So usually in PCOS there are many ovarian cysts. They'll migrate to the outer part of the ovaries, giving the ovary kind of a lumpy, bumpy, kind of enlarged appearance to the ovary. Usually there's some insulin resistance involved because there is the high sugar, high carbohydrate connection between elevating insulin, suppressing normal ovulation, leading to ovarian cyst or PCOS. But with PCOS then, usually the androgen hormones, which are testosterone, includes testosterone, will often increase. And this is why women that have PCOS will start to get more hair growth on the face and arms and the body. This is why they can even get a deepening in their voice, why they'll be more prone to acne, is why they will sometimes become infertile and not be able to get pregnant, is because of how testosterone will gradually increase over time, because there is not a normal complete ovulation taking place month after month. And certainly a big part of it is the progesterone deficiency. In fact, progesterone helps to balance out higher testosterone. So if there's not a complete ovulation, progesterone goes low, and that allows estrogen or testosterone to go even higher as well. So again, it's understanding the connection between PCOS, and for a lot of people, it comes back to what's happened with their diet, even young as a child, eating too many carbohydrates, too many sugary kinds of things. And it's going to be very difficult to fix that PCOS and get the ovaries functioning normal if there's not a strong focus on improving diet and cutting out the sugars and getting to a lower carbohydrate type diet. So with that in mind, in the seminar handout, the very last page, you'll see is a quick guide to the low glycemic index. So I talked about how glycemic index is a number given to food based on how high that's going to cause your blood sugar levels to go. And so they are provided for you on a single page, all the different food categories and the foods in that category that are considered to be low glycemic index. So that's a nice reference for you. I will say for that I wouldn't consider all those foods as necessarily healthy food choices, but at least you have some kind of reference of what will be the low glycemic index choices. Signs and symptoms of PCOS, usually increased estrogen dominance. A lot of times, again, estrogen is a fat-storing hormone, so as estrogen levels go up, women will often gain weight. Sweet cravings, carbohydrate cravings because of the what's going on with blood sugar and insulin levels. Testosterone levels will increase, so a female will then get more acne and facial hair. Often this can lead to infertility. And again, as estrogen levels go up and stay up, this will directly suppress thyroid function, leading to hypothyroidism. The blood sugar insulin connection can contribute to diabetes and heart disease. and then just the combination of everything, all the stress on the body, and how the adrenals are functioning can lead to high blood pressure as well. I want to show you an example of how one way that we can target estrogen dominance. And so certainly one strategy when there's too much estrogen in the body is we can actually give the body more progesterone. And so here's the product. Here, the main ingredient is abbreviated DIM. Sometimes you'll see this listed as I3C or indole-3-carbinol. Basically what this is, it's an extract of cruciferous vegetables. So those would be broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, I think kale is part of that. And it's really interesting that in research they found that there's a particular ingredient in these cruciferous vegetables that when you give it concentrated at a higher therapeutic dose, it actually will support the liver in the very specific way that helps to clean out excess estrogen out of the body. So not only when there's a significant estrogen dominance going on, not only can we try to achieve balance more quickly by giving some natural progesterone, we can also approach it from the other end and help the body to detoxify and clean out this excess estrogen more quickly as well. Menopause, there's a few categories. Premenopause syndrome is the increase of hormone problems and irregularities that can occur up to 10 to 15 years before menopause. Perimenopause usually refers to the 2 to 3 years around the time or just before menopause. And then menopause is obviously a normal stage in a woman's life in which she no longer has any kind of menstrual periods. Normally occurs late 40s to early 50s, is considered official when there are no periods that have occurred for 12 consecutive months. Should be a gradual, natural transition without symptoms, but we know in a more industrialized country like in America, it is often associated with many symptoms. So it's important to know that there are populations of people or regions of the world where it's quite rare for women to have hot flashes and night sweats, to have these menopause symptoms when they go into menopause. And what it's really reflecting is the differences in society between diets and chemical exposure and stress as well. So just know that that it's actually, although it is common and often expected that women will get some menopause symptoms, it's actually not normal for that to happen. It should be just a normal, natural, gradual transition with little to no symptoms. Hot flashes and night sweats can be caused by either estrogen or progesterone deficiency. We tend to think of this more so with estrogen levels going down more rapidly, but sometimes it can be due to the fact that progesterone levels are too low as well. Night sweats can cause considerable sleep disruption and can lead to sleep deprivation, often mistaken for insomnia, but it's not really insomnia. It's just that a woman's not sleeping because of the stronger menopause symptoms. This is interesting that younger women are often dismissed by many doctors as being too young to actually have these symptoms. And I've talked with many women who are even in their 30s, and they're telling me, I'm getting hot flashes, but my doctor says I'm not. Well, how can you be getting them but not be getting them, right? So obviously there's enough imbalance of hormones where it's causing these menopause symptoms, even though she's way too early before going into menopause. And so it's just telling us there's that greater severity of hormone imbalance, and if it's bad now, then if we don't do anything, it's going to be probably quite a bit worse later on when a woman actually goes into menopause. Here I wanted to show you nutritionally there are ways that we can support giving relief to the menopause symptoms. And what I like about this example is I like nutritional products that are more complex, where they can accomplish more than one thing at a time. So when you look at the listing of ingredients here, we see ones that are more specific herbal things relating to hormone balance. Here are wild yam, black cohosh, dong quai. These are ones that bring some natural, what we call phytoestrogens into the body when estrogen levels are getting too low. But what I like about this particular one is these first four ingredients are all connected back to supporting adrenal function. So why not take something, we know in order to reduce or decrease the chances of getting menopause symptoms, we need to make sure that adrenal function is good. So why not take something that's going to accomplish more than one thing at a time? Let me go over to the questions here. Deborah's asking, she says she works with circuit boards which are made of lead. Do you think that absorbs into the bloodstream? I find when you look at possible exposures to different kinds of toxic heavy metals like lead and mercury and other ones as well, very frequently, if a person works with metal materials, especially if there's kind of soldering or grinding in there, it's very, very likely that a person's getting some exposure to that. I would say a person who has been a smoker in the past or the present, it's almost a sure thing that they've had exposure to toxic heavy metals. Very often the question comes up, well, what about these mercury amalgam fillings? And I think that certainly can be an exposure to these toxic elements within the body, and it will vary from person to person in terms of how it will affect them as well. But there's several sources of exposure, but the kind of work a person does, and if they're working with metal materials, that can often be an exposure. Judy is saying here, I had a hysterectomy over 30 years ago, and I am postmenopausal. Should estrogen progesterone imbalance be a concern for an older woman like me? Excuse me. Well, it is a concern because we think about the health of your bone tissue, the health of your cardiovascular system is directly tied into the balance of these hormones, and so as well as adrenal function. So maybe you're not getting necessarily menopausal symptoms. You probably, when you had your hysterectomy, if it was a total hysterectomy, you probably were kind of surgically thrown into menopause if the ovaries were removed at that same time. But hormone balance is still a concern when you think about the health of your heart and cardiovascular system, the health of your bone tissue and maintaining good bone density, the health of your brain, really, because hormones affect so many things. So it's still relevant, definitely. Tina's asking here, can you repeat about the estrogen detox? Was making notes. Oh, so the estrogen, that particular product I was showing that was called estrogen detox. Here, maybe I can skip back to it. I was saying that the particular ingredient, sometimes you'll see it listed as, abbreviated as DIM. Sometimes you'll see it listed as I3C or indole-3-carbinol. But again, this is an extract from cruciferous vegetables, and the mechanism is that this particular ingredient is very specific in supporting the liver in the way the liver will help to detoxify or clean out excess estrogen out of the body as well. So for women who are suffering with estrogen dominance or too much estrogen in the body, this can be another way that we can help bring those hormone levels back into balance a little bit more quickly. Amy's asking, can you give an idea of the cost of hormone testing? So if you're doing saliva hormone testing, if it's for a female who's still having a monthly cycle, so we're gathering 10 to 11 samples over the month-long cycle, keeping in mind they're analyzing every single one of those samples, the labs fee on that I believe is $200. What I do when I work with people is I don't mark up the cost of the hormone testing. I just have you pay the labs fee, and that gives you the lowest possible cost on testing. If it is a female who's already in menopause, then there's just a single sample that's gathered, and that one is either 100 or 120, but it's also testing, we're also looking at some adrenal testing as well along with that, because we want to know how the adrenals are functioning along with what's going on with estrogen and progesterone and testosterone as well. Let's talk a little bit more about hormone testing. So we've kind of already covered this, the difference between saliva and blood testing, so I'll kind of skip through this part of it. But let's talk about natural versus synthetic hormones. When you talk about doing a hormone replacement therapy, does it really matter whether you're taking a natural hormone or a man-made or synthetic hormone, which is usually what will get prescribed? So to help you understand this, I want you to take a look at these two different chemical structures and tell me what you see as the difference between these two chemical structures. And looking at this at a quick glance, they're actually very, very similar. Really, the difference is here towards kind of the one end, there's an OH versus the O. There's a few more lines here indicating double bonds, but at a quick glance, these chemical structures are very, very similar. They might even look identical if you're not looking close enough at it. So, however, as similar as they look, they could not be any more different, because the first one is estrogen and the second one is testosterone. The first one makes you female, the second one makes you male. And so with only a very small change in the chemical structure of the hormone, you actually get a very different effect of that hormone. So the question is, does it really matter, natural versus... Again, the reason why a prescribed hormone is usually a man-made or synthetic hormone, because you'd think, even pharmaceutical companies understand that a bioidentical hormone, which means that the hormone matches exactly in chemical structure, is more compatible to the body. It's going to cause less problems. It's going to be better utilized by the body. So then the question is, why don't all pharmaceutical companies just go ahead and make everything bioidentical? And the reason is that you cannot patent a substance that naturally occurs within the body. And so in order for a pharmaceutical company to make a hormone, like a prescribed hormone product, they have to change the chemical structure, and then they give it some kind of fancy name, and then they can mark up the cost of it, and they can make a bunch of profit off it. So there's a profit motive to not manufacturing hormone products, so that they're not identical to what your body produces. But we know that when they are identical, that they are so much better received by the body and utilized by the body. So here's an example of a hormone kind of replacement that's called Premarin. And basically Premarin is kind of an acronym for pregnant mare's urine. So pregnant horse urine is what is used to derive or extract this particular hormone ingredient that becomes part of what goes into that prescription as well. And so again, with only one small change in the chemical structure of the hormone, you get potentially a very different effect. So natural or bioidentical hormone replacement, synthetic hormones are not the same in chemical structure as to what your body would produce. Because they are not natural to your body, or I should say they are not natural to your body, because they are not the same, these synthetic hormones can build up in your system, adding to symptoms of estrogen dominance. Bioidentical natural hormones are the same in chemical structure as to what your body would produce. Bioidentical hormones should still, though, be introduced gradually in a very intelligent way, usually under the guidance of someone who knows what they're doing. Certainly, migraines can be connected to what's going on with the monthly cycle, and I think I'm going to kind of skip past a couple slides because I still want to get into this final, there's a final piece here. I'm already getting a little bit past my time. We've already talked about how estrogen gets stored in breast tissue leading into fibrocystic breast disease. We talked about the connection between hormones and osteoporosis. I'm going to skip through this. I want to get to the importance of vitamin D. So vitamin D is easily one of the most heavily researched of all the vitamins and minerals for probably several years now. And vitamin D, in some ways, a lot of people will describe it as almost a hormone because it will act like a hormone in the way that it will contact and communicate with your cells. So vitamin D, when you look at the benefits, has a blood sugar balancing effect because your pancreas needs enough vitamin D in order to produce insulin. Insulin is what helps keep your blood sugars under control. Vitamin D, there's a direct effect on having healthier female hormone balance, a direct effect on having more balanced brain chemistry. I've had some women that when they test really low in their vitamin D levels, once we get them going on a higher therapeutic dose, that they then, within a couple weeks, can have a dramatic increase in their energy levels. And doesn't always happen that way, but it's happened enough times where it's worth noting that low vitamin D could also be contributing to lower energy levels. Vitamin D has some important immune system benefits as well, in that I find women will comment to me that once we get their vitamin D levels up, it seems to be more of an antiviral benefit where they don't catch a cold as easily. Maybe they used to get the flu every year, but now they don't get the flu anymore. The most important benefit, I think, are the cancer protective effects of vitamin D, and that vitamin D helps to prevent the proliferation or abnormal growth of cells within the body, which is really what most cancers are cells that are growing abnormally. So vitamin D, as a very simple, inexpensive nutrient, has a very powerful effect on suppressing that abnormal cell growth. So powerful, in fact, that if the entire population were to have vitamin D levels tested and they were taking vitamin D if needed to get them up to the right level, there would be an obvious decrease probably in most cancers, maybe all cancers. So it's really quite a big deal. So then the question is, what is optimal vitamin D levels? So it's becoming more common even medically where they will test vitamin D levels, but really when you look at the level that you want to be at to get all the benefits that vitamin D has to offer, you want to be in a blood testing range of 60 to 80. Here's an example as it relates to some different conditions. And here is a graph, research data that was put together by some people. And the numbers across the top, this shows vitamin D levels as found in blood testing. And I want to use the example of breast cancer here, so that third one down. What they're saying in their combined research is that if all women tested in the mid-30s in their vitamin D levels, that there would be they could predict that there would be easily a 30% decrease in breast cancer, meaning that 30% of women that would have been diagnosed with breast cancer actually would no longer get that diagnosis. They extrapolate out that if vitamin D levels in all women were in the low 50s, it could be as high as the low 80s for women who would end up not getting breast cancer. And so this is quite a big deal here. And so, you know, even if we were to be more critical and say, well, you know, not all research is done correctly, and even if it decreased the chances by 5 or 10%, does that still make it worthwhile to be taking vitamin D? Then, in my opinion, is such a really an inexpensive thing to be doing as well that it's kind of a no-brainer that even if this research is not fully correct, there is no doubt that vitamin D helps to decrease the abnormal cell growth, which is really what cancer is. And so by far is a huge advantage to making sure that your vitamin D levels are good. And here's an example. You want to make sure you're getting vitamin D3. And typically when you buy vitamin D, it's always going to be in the D3 form. If you're prescribed vitamin D, it probably would be in the D2 form. And that's when vitamin D gets prescribed by a medical provider, and a lot of times it's this mega dose of 50,000 units that you take once or a couple times a week. And I've had a lot of women I've seen who are doing that prescribed form, and their vitamin D levels are very slow to increase. And but once we get them going on the natural vitamin D3 at the right therapeutic dose, that their levels increase much faster. Any questions? Go ahead and type them in now. I'll come back to your questions as they pop up here. So then here's the question of how can I take back control of my hormone balance to improve how I'm feeling now and be healthier as I get older? And I'm glad you asked that question. Obviously you weren't thinking of that, but you are now. So I find at this point, well, let me jump over to the question from Deborah. So what's a good dose for vitamin D3? So that's a good question. Without doing blood testing, I'm very comfortable having a person go to 4,000 to 5,000 units per day. I wouldn't go any higher than that without blood testing showing that there's a need, there's a greater deficiency. I will sometimes take a person up to 10,000 units for a few months, but then I'm always going back and retesting to see if they still need to be at that higher dose or if we should reduce the dose as well. There is such a thing as getting too much vitamin D, which is why you want to let blood testing monitor your dose when you're taking the higher therapeutic doses. Tina's asking any other supplemental suggestions, selenium, copper, zinc. There are individual nutrients that are certainly very specific to hormone balance. And as a general recommendation, I'm not gonna say any of that because really, again, it's the lab testing that will guide what those recommendations would be. But in general, you think about the vitamins, minerals, amino acids, fatty acids, enzymes. These are like the basic resources that become the foundation of all of your body chemistry and even become the structure of your cells and the structure of your tissues as well. So any deficiency of any one of those nutrients can have a domino effect that can filter in many different ways, including having a negative impact on hormone balance as well. So again, looking at the slide, it's always it's fun for me after being a doctor for over 18 years now and helping a lot of women in different situations and different problems to be at a point in my career where I feel pretty confident that pretty much anything that walks through my door or any consultations I do, I know that there's going to be a good chance that I'm going to help them and probably help them to a great degree. And hopefully that doesn't sound like I'm bragging. It's just the wisdom of experience and being able to help a lot of people over a period of time. It's also a lot of fun too when you work with someone and they have enough confidence where they're willing to share their experience with other people. And so here's a patient of mine from several years back. Her name is Jennifer, and I want to kind of play her video here. It'll pop up. And some of you may have already seen this, but I want to have you watch it again if you've already seen it.
Hi, my name is Jennifer, and I've been working with Dr. Larson since about last March of 2012. When I first met Dr. Larson, it was at one of his Mastering Your Hormone Balancing seminars, or free, and it was perfect timing. I was really struggling with my health, and in particular, I had very low energy, fatigue, and even a little bit of depression. I also was experiencing dramatic weight gain when I hadn't changed my diet or my exercise routine, so it was a very discouraging time. When I met him, I got a lot of information that I never knew about the female body and the issues that we deal with at different ages and what causes hormone imbalances and other health issues that women face. After seeing the seminar, I contacted Dr. Larson right away. And the first thing that he did was he had tested me for heavy metal toxicity. And in fact, I did have it, and I began treatment right away. I'll just backstep and tell you that I had been on birth control a couple months prior, and when I took myself off of birth control, I noticed that all of these symptoms got dramatically worse. And I was probably at about 10 or 20% functionality over previous energy levels in my life, and it was pretty difficult. I couldn't do regular tasks. I had to schedule my day to basically be done, being useful by 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And so when I started working with him, I was very desperate to feel better. So I did the metal toxicity testing, had the metal toxicity. After taking the metal toxicity, which took about a month, I noticed an increase in functionality and feeling better. I had mental clarity, and my energy started to return a little bit even after that. I also experienced a complete elimination of seasonal allergies I've suffered with my entire life, and I have not had any recurrence in that. So that was a really great unexpected result. I felt about 15% better, so I was up to about 20-25% better feeling after that. We also did my blood work and realized that I was very deficient in vitamins D and B, which was very much contributing to my fatigue and depression and low energy. And within a month to 3 months, I was feeling excellent. I was probably feeling at about 65% better than I had, and that was only over the course of 3 or 4 months working with Dr. Larson. It was great to have real information about my body instead of speculating about what might be the problem. And then from there, we did some testing with my hormones to see if there were some imbalances there, and we found that, in fact, there were. And so I set out to work with Dr. Larson on his prescribed course of action for that, and within a month or two, I also just started to feel dramatically better. So by the time I had completed or gotten into the hormone correction, I was feeling probably about 90% better, and that was putting us at around September, October. It's now November, almost December of 2012, and I've changed my diet slightly in the last couple of weeks. Really, I just tweaked my diet. I'm doing high protein, low fat, low carb, and I've lost about 7 pounds in 2 weeks. I have a ton of energy. My appetite's changed. I feel energetic and full and satisfied, and I'm losing the weight that I had gained during that time. So I highly recommend working with Dr. Larson. He is just a pleasure to work with. I had the benefit of working with him in office and virtually, which he does now in his practice, and I have found the transition to be seamless. He's just as accessible as he was before. It's not high technology. It's really easy to see the information and have phone calls with him to consult, and it's just very efficient to get the supplements by mail, order online, and I highly recommend working with him. I have no idea what position I would be in right now if I hadn't started working with him 6 to 7 months ago or so, and I'm really thankful. So I highly recommend that you pick up the phone and start working with him. I hope this was helpful. Thank you.
So I wanted to show that video because I think she did a nice job of communicating the process, but she really emphasized how the importance of doing the heavy metal screening test and how just that alone had a big impact on how she was feeling. She also, I think, did a nice job of explaining how it's not usually a fast process. A lot of times these imbalances have been going on for years or decades, and so you have to have a realistic expectation. It's not like you do something for a couple of weeks and everything's fine again. It's a process, and it can take a while to get the hormones balanced. It can take a little while to get the adrenals functioning, but all these things I talked about, sometimes women, by the time they're done with the seminar, they might be a little bit depressed. So they think about, oh my gosh, is this even fixable? And I can tell you from experience that these are all fixable things that I've been talking about as well. So I know that typically after doing a presentation like this, there are usually at least a handful of women who they know they have concerns going on. They want to talk to somebody that has a lot of experience in dealing with their kind of hormone imbalance concerns. And so I wanted to put out there a special offer if this is something that interests you. So certainly everybody who attended this live presentation of the webinar, I'll be sending a link. Actually, everyone who just registered, I'll be sending a link to get a free copy of my ebook I created a while ago called The 7 Keys to Weight Loss Success. And just so you know what this is, you might remember from the very beginning I talked about how when I first got into practice, my focus was initially on weight loss. And the reason why I wrote this book is I found myself over and over kind of explaining some of the basic concepts, and I thought, well, why don't I just write it out and give it to people that way? So that's what I did. So this book is about some of the most basic concepts. Some of these you will know, and it will kind of reinforce your thinking, and it will also probably introduce you to some new ideas as well. So it's some good information. And also, to give you a little bit of incentive, if you sign up to receive an initial consultation with me within the next couple hours here, I'll give you 50% off that initial consultation appointment. So it'll only be $49. So I do charge for all my consultations. Normally the initial consultation, I spend usually at least 30 minutes, sometimes a little bit longer, just focusing on you and what your concerns are and talking about everything that's going on. Normally it's a $99 fee, but I'll do that for $49 if you kind of sign up for that within the next couple hours here when we're done. And then, the way I think about this is for $49, for a little bit more than the cost of an insurance copay for a lot of people. When was the last time that you were able to sit down or just talk with a specialist, a doctor that has a really strong specialty in female issues, hormone issues, in nutrition and diet, and other kinds of health concerns as well? And it's really a time that's focused entirely on you, about you, and what's going on, and what can be done to help you feel better. So, also, if you sign up to receive that initial consultation with me within the next couple hours after this presentation, the live presentation here, I will give you a free heavy metal screening test, and this will be sent to you after you do your consultation appointment. I'll still have to have you pay for shipping for that, but the heavy metal screening test is normally it's $29.95. You add a little bit of sales to that, tax to that. But if you're someone where you know that you want to improve what's going on with your health and how your body's functioning, what's going on with your hormones, here's an opportunity to do this where you get half off the initial consultation, you get the heavy metal screening test for free, and hopefully if that'll be some incentive for you to want to go ahead and make that initial contact and want to talk about what's going on with you. Deborah has a question. Where am I located? I've tried to find your office and couldn't find it. I thought you were in a big white building. I can't find you. So right now, I actually moved my practice a couple times recently, and I'm actually right now without a physical office location. I'm looking for a new one. I'm trying to stay in the Elk River area, which is where I've been for a while, and still live as well. So. However, I have a lot of people I've worked with in the past where it's all done through kind of phone and internet consultation. So for right now, that's probably how we would do it. And but I'll still make myself available, 1 or 2 days a month at least, where for people that want to meet with me face to face, I'll make sure I have a place that we can set that up and do that with as well. I have people that live very close to where my office is, and they still want to consult with me through a phone and internet consultations just because they like the convenience of not having to drive anywhere, and they know me well enough to know that I'm gonna take care of them just as well as if we were meeting in person, and so they like that extra convenience. So here's how you get that special offer. Here's what you do. You want to make a note of this: is go to the website at healingchoices.com, click on the tab or the button for online store, and when you go to that page for the online store, right in the middle of the page, you'll see kind of this kind of wording of webinar special or a special webinar, and to purchase. So click on the word buy below that, and then from there, once you click on that, go to the upper right-hand side of the page and click on checkout. And then once you complete your purchase, I'll give you a call by the end of the week so we can set up that initial consultation. The other option is you can call me directly. The number is 763-241-5436. And if you call me by midnight tonight Central Time, I can't guarantee that I will be able to answer, but if you at least leave me a message before midnight, I will know that you called before midnight, then I'll extend that same offer to you as well. So I wanted to thank you for listening in on the Mastering Hormone Balance for Women. This is myself and my younger daughter, Anna. This is actually getting to be a really young picture of her. She just turned 5 years old a couple weeks ago, and so her and I thank you for attending. And I think I'm going to go ahead. I'm well over my time, and I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar now. And feel free to call me or email me if you think of other questions. Or really the best thing is just go ahead and get set up for that initial consultation, and we can go into even more greater detail with questions that you have. So thanks again, and know too that I will likely be doing this webinar format again sometime in the future, maybe even within the next month or so, and I will let you know by email if I'm doing that. So if you have other women that you know of that you think would enjoy this, you can let them know, and they can get the same education. So all right, thank you very much, and have a great rest of your night, and hopefully if you need help, hopefully I'll be hearing from you soon. Thank you.